Last week, we added a procedural river to our scene using Unreal's water system, new in Unreal 4.26. But the water feels really out of place in our scene. This week, we're going to add polish to the water's material and set up the river so that it contributes to our landscape auto material. Let's go! Alright, the first thing that we want to do is edit the river's material so it feels a little bit less like Caribbean ocean water and a little bit more like a mountain stream. So we're just going to edit a couple of settings. If I select my river here and come down here to the water material river, I'll just double click it and here's my material instance. And so the first thing that I want to adjust is the absorption and scattering. These absorption settings control where the various wavelengths of light get absorbed by the water. So that you can see currently it's set to 10, 150, 350. And what that means is that red light gets absorbed by the water at 10 centimeters. Green light gets absorbed at 1.5 meters, and then blue light gets absorbed at 3.5 meters. And then the alpha channel is just a multiplier, which basically means that all of these get multiplied by 8. So we're going to adjust these so that the color of the water feels a little bit more like a mountain stream. And so in order to do that, I'm just going to set it to 0.148 for red, 0.133 for green, and the same thing for blue. And I know that you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't look like a mountain stream. But the last thing that I'm going to do is change the multiplier to 512. And basically what this is going to do for us is just make the water kind of a brownish color. And that will help because it will make our water feel like it's kind of filled with silt and a little bit more like a stream that's carrying sediment with it rather than crystal clear, beautiful ocean water. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is change scattering. And scattering is kind of like fog for water. And so what I'm going to do here is just set this to 0.4, 0.38, and 0.35, and then I'm going to set the multiplier to 4. And what you can see here is that now, instead of being really clear, the water feels just a little bit misty, and it kind of helps to make it feel like it's filled with sediment, you know, little particulates that the water has picked up and is carrying along. So with those two settings changes, our water no longer looks like, you know, crystal clear water that you might see at a Caribbean beach. And it feels a little bit more like something that you might see in the mountains. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, the last setting that I want to change is the refraction. If we look at our water here, you can see that the water is refracting what's underneath it. But it's a little bit too crazy. The refraction is really strong. So I'm going to come down here under refraction, and I'm going to set my refraction to 1.05 just to kind of tone that down a little bit. You can see it's still refracting, but it's just not quite as strong. Okay, the other problem that we had with our water is that, I don't know if you can see this, but if I come underwater here, it's growing all of this grass underwater, and I have these trees growing in the water, and basically the problem is that my water is not contributing to the landscape's auto material. What I'd really like to do is to have a specific material that is assigned to my water where wherever the water is, that material will be assigned to the landscape. I want it to be kind of pebbly looking, more like a stream bed. Right now, I'm going to select the Water Mesh Actor 2 here and make this not visible. So you can see that even though the water spline is affecting the height of the terrain of my landscape, we still have grass and dirt here on the banks of the river. And what I'd really want to do is have this river spline lay down a nice pebbly bed for the river instead of growing grass where the river belongs. And in order to be able to do that, I could just add a pebbly material to my landscape material and then paint it in the right place. But the problem with that is I would lose the flexibility of having my river be procedural. Meaning, if I came in and moved my river spline, I would then have to go in and paint everything by hand. And so what I want to do is set up this riverbed material so that it gets applied procedurally. And there's 3 steps that I need to follow in order to make that happen. First, I need to adjust my material so that I have a riverbed material added to it. Second, I need to update my water brush manager. And then third, I need to make some adjustments to my water body river. So we're going to go through those 3 steps now. First of all, I need to update my landscape material. So I'm going to switch tabs here to my landscape material. And this is the material that we've made in previous tutorials. In a previous tutorial, we set up the runtime virtual texture, but you can see that I've disabled that for now, and I've just kind of moved it out of the way. And that's just to make our landscape rendering a little bit more accurate for now. I'm giving up the performance gains that I get when I use runtime virtual textures, just in order to make our landscape rendering a little bit more accurate for this tutorial. Okay, the first thing that I need to do is add in a riverbed material. And I've done that. You can see that I've got this river stones material here. And I need to incorporate it into the rest of my landscape material. So after adding this material, I'm now going to take my layer blend node and add a new layer here. And I'm going to open it up. You can see I've got layer number 4 here. And I'm going to name this layer River. And I'm going to set it to LB Weight Blend. And now you can see, actually, I'm going to set it to LB Height Blend. You can see that my layer blend node here now has layer river and height river. So I'm going to pull my river material here and plug the material output into layer river and the height output into height river. So now I have my material set up correctly with the river material addition. And I also need to incorporate it into my displacement. So these nodes here are lerping my height data together so that it works correctly with displacement. And I'm going to go ahead and clone the last elements of this. And instead of wiring my lerp out into my displacement node, I'm going to wire it into this one. And I'm going to bring my height over from my riverbed material and plug it into the B input socket of my lerp. And instead of using my snow mask, I'm going to use my river mask. All right, so that is set up. And I'm going to wire that into my displacement height output. And also I can wire it into the mask node of my runtime virtual texture as well for later. I'm not actually using the runtime texture or runtime virtual texture right now. But if we do hook it up later, then that'll work great. All right, the next thing that I need to do is, here is my grass node. And you can see that I've got a mask coming into it that controls where the grass is placed. And I also have a mask coming into it that determines where the dirt is placed. Well, I can use this sample river mask. This determines, or this is controlling where my river is applied. And if I subtract this mask from my grass and also from my dirt, I'll be able to remove the grass and trees from wherever the river shows up. So I'm going to add a subtract node here. And then I'm going to wire the sample river mask into that. And then I'll make that my grass. And I'm going to do the same thing for the dirt. I'm going to wire the dirt mask into here and then subtract the river from the dirt mask so that no grass or trees will grow in the areas where my river is showing up, because I'm removing that mask from my grass and from my trees. Now the last thing that I can do in this material is I can add a new grass element. Right now I have two. I have my grass and my dirt. But I'm going to add a new grass element, and I'm going to name this one River. So wherever my river is added, instead of growing grass or trees, I'm actually going to add some rocks. And that's going to look really nice. So I went ahead and created a new grass type. And so I'll drop this down, and you can see I have this grass type named River. I'm just going to double click and open up the river grass type and show you what this looks like really quickly. You can see that I have 12 different items here, and each of these items is a rock. I'm using all of the same rocks that we used in our forest stream level. And these are assets that I downloaded from Quixel Megascans using Bridge. And I'll put the link to these assets in the description so you know which they are. But basically these are just a bunch of little cobblestone river rocks with some moss on them that we can add. And what this does is it's going to automatically add these river rocks wherever the river is. So just like I'm automatically adding grass and I'm automatically adding trees, now I'm automatically going to be adding these rocks wherever that river is placed. So just to kind of take a look at the settings, I've got the density set to 10. I've got the cull distance set somewhere between 6,500 and 8,800, just to kind of feather them out. And then I've got random rotation. I've got them automatically aligning to the surface of the landscape. I think everything else is pretty much default. All right, so as soon as we get this material automatically being applied by our river, it's also going to automatically apply these cool stones. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this material. Oh, I did forget one thing. Just like we're automatically creating the landscape auto material here, we need to let our river material contribute to our landscape auto material. So I'm going to clone this matte layer blend custom node here, and I'm going to plug the blended material into the base material, the blended height into the base height. And then for my river material here, or for my riverbed material, I'm going to plug that into my top material and my top height. And for the blend mask, I'm going to use my sample river node here. I'm going to plug that into the alpha and the vertex. And now I'm going to plug this into my layer auto. So this blend node is going to be using the river material and applying it automatically to my auto material. And then the output height here, I'm going to pass that into the base chain for my height map lerp that's being used for the displacement. Okay, I think I've done everything I needed to do in the material. Basically, I just brought in this new river material and incorporated it into the auto material, incorporated it into the layer blend, incorporated it into the height and displacement, and also incorporated it into my grass. Okay, so that's done, and we'll go ahead and save it. All right, so at this point, if I come back to my map and I click on this modes button here and switch to landscape mode, you can see that I have this new material added into my landscape layers called river. You might not get this automatically if you make the adjustments that I just made, what you're going to have to do is reassign your landscape material to the landscape. And once you do that, it should show up with a river layer just like this. And then you'll also need to create a new layer info element and assign it to the layer. Once you've done those things, you'll be able to go ahead and start painting the river layer like this. So if I just click and drag, you can see now I'm painting the cobblestone river layer, and that works pretty good. But the problem is, if I start painting it manually like this, and then I move the river around, I'm gonna have to repaint things. So I don't want to have to manually paint where the river goes. And so I'm just gonna hit Control Z and undo what I just did there. And what I'm gonna show you next is how to make this river spline automatically lay down that riverbed material. Okay, the first thing that I need to do, I'm going to switch out of landscape mode again. And the first thing that I'm going to need to do is come over here and select the water brush manager. Here it is, Landscape 1 Water Brush Manager. This is an asset that gets added automatically when you add a river. So I'm going to come down here to Settings, and I need to turn on Affect Weight Map. So I'm going to check this box here, and then here is Affected Weight Map Layers, and I need to add a new element. And here in this layer, I need to call it River. This is the same name as the layer that I added to my material. So if we come back here, you can see that I have this sample river, and I have this layer river. And so for my water brush manager, I also need to add a river element. And I'm gonna save that. And then the last thing that I need to do is select my water body river. And I'm gonna scroll down to my layer weight map settings. And I'm gonna add a new element here. And just like I did in the water brush manager, I'm gonna name this one River. And you can see that it's already starting to take effect. And I'm just gonna come over here and adjust the fall off. This is how blurry the edges of it are. And in my case, I want the edges to be pretty blurry. So I'm just gonna set that to 100. Did you notice what happened? Now my spline here is applying this river material. And man, does that look cool. So I actually made the water go away. The water's hidden right now, but it makes it really obvious that my spline is adding this river material. But you can see there's still a little bit of grass there. Let's see if there's something that we can do to get rid of that, because this material looks like it's blending maybe with an opacity that's lower than 100%. So I wonder if we change our final opacity here to maybe 2. No, that didn't do it for us. We need to go back to our material and maybe adjust the way that our mask is being applied. So here we have our river mask. And what I'm just gonna do is create an add node, and I'm gonna double up this mask. So I just added the mask to itself, and that'll make the mask double strong. Then I'm gonna add a saturate just to clamp it between 0 and 1. And then instead of using sample river, I'm just gonna use the sample river added to itself. And then I'm gonna subtract that, and I'm gonna wire that into my river grass node input. And I'll go ahead and save that. And now, after we doubled up our mask, you can see that we've removed the grass. So we no longer have grass growing in the middle of our river, but we do have these rocks. It looks pretty cool. Well, let's go ahead and turn our river back on. So I'm just gonna set the rendering to visible again. And now you can see that our river has gone a really long way in this video in just making it feel more like it fits in our scene. It no longer looks like a Caribbean beach water, but it looks more like river water, and we've got the river automatically adding its own riverbed material and also automatically adding in these cobblestone rocks, which is pretty cool. And the best part is, if I decide that I want to edit my river and change where it is, all of these features will go right along with it. So if I move this spline over here and then give it just a minute to update, you'll see that it's going to reposition those thousands of rocks that were applied. It's going to reposition the material that the river is applying to the landscape. All of those things are going to happen automatically. You can see it looks kind of weird right now, but it's because it's rebuilding all those things. But if we give it just a minute, now you can see that the engine has automatically updated all of the grass, all of the trees, all of the rocks, and everything's working great. And this is such a super powerful feature of the engine. I love being able to do things procedurally because it gives us maximum flexibility in control. You know, if the game designers come along and they say, hey, you know, we need to change the gameplay around, I don't have to build everything by hand as I did in the previous level that we made. So if I just undo that change and move the river back to where it was, now the engine is just going to go through and rebuild everything again for me automatically, you know, without me having to remove trees and remove grass and repaint things. It just all happens automatically, and it's incredible. I hope you guys like this too. All right, now, as is the tradition on the channel, the last thing that we're going to do today is hit play and take our mannequin for a run and take a look at our progress. All right, so here's our river, and we've got our nice riverbed material. We've got our river water looking much more like a mountain stream than a Caribbean ocean. And we've got our automatically placed rocks that come right along with the riverbed material. And everything's working together really nicely. There is quite a bit more polish that I can do laying down these river rocks, and more polish to the grass and those kinds of things. I think I could add more polish to just about everything in this scene, and I may spend some time this week just kind of prettying things up. But I hope that I've been able to convey all of the principles that you need to make these things work technically, and to be able to build a procedural level like this yourself. I hope you've enjoyed this week's video. If you did, be sure to give it a like, and come back next week and we'll talk more about building landscapes procedurally in Unreal. Thanks a lot, everybody.